then open up the floor because there might be some overlapping questions that people might have. So calling on first Mr. Chaitanya Krishna Rao. I hope I got your name right. Chaitanya is from Guinea and he has many years of experience in dealing with the agricultural side of the reuse of fecal sludge.
As the put of the slide, I advance thank you all for really being here for this session, especially it's a torture session post-lunch to attend and listen to this big lecture. My presentation is primarily on presenting fecal sludge business models. So the business models what presenting here, the objective of this thing was primarily to develop business model which can be easily adopted by the governments, private entrepreneurs, and even donors. I will not talk much about this slide because this, I'll not say much about the sanitation service delivery chain because this audience is very knowledgeable about it. The only reason I have this slide is primarily to highlight what I'm focusing on the business model side. So I'm focusing mainly on emptying and transport related business model, but will not cover much on it for this presentation. Combining emptying, transport, and treatment. With focus on reuse, we have heard very little about reuse till now in all the sessions, so hopefully I'll set up the benchmark. And then combining all the chain except for access to toilet, looking at the business model for the rest of the sanitation service delivery chain. Now when we look at many business cases, successful business cases around the world in India, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and we try to make a generic business model here using the Osterwalder business model canvas. I know it's very small, it's intended to be small here so that you cannot read. But I will explain in detail what it is. The Osterwalder model is primarily trying to suggest what the key value proposition that the fecal sludge business model can provide, who the key customer segments are, how do you reach out to these key customer segments through your channels and how customer relationships are, what your key activities, key resources, and your key partners are. And at the same time, provide what your cost structure looks and revenue streams looks. So, broadly, you can define the entire fecal sludge business model into 4 value propositions. First one is you improving the sanitation service by timely emptying and collection of fecal sludge and providing treatment. This is broadly applicable to the whole sanitation service delivery chain. And your key customer segment is mainly the household, community, and business. And even municipality could sometimes fit in. My other 3 value propositions primarily derived from the reuse perspective. One, we all very well know fecal sludge can be used as a compost, as a soil ameliorant. And for this, the key customers are the farmers, nursery, plantation, landscaping, and so on. Again, fecal sludge has energy in it, so energy can be generated and can improve the energy security. And again, your customers are household, community, municipality, and business. And since you're also doing all of this, and you're treating fecal sludge, you can potentially capture carbon. So this is broadly the value proposition of the customers. And the revenue that you can capture are sanitation service, sale of compost, sale of energy, and the carbon credits. So Osterwalder business model framework only covered the cost structure and revenue. We also added specifically the social and environmental angle, where you do have social and environmental costs, irrespective, you cannot avoid it in the sanitation service delivery chain. There will be costs to the human who are exposed when they are to the sanitation service delivery chain, even during the treatment. So there will be health risk for that, and potentially with the compost, if the compost is of not the right quality, despite whatever regulations we do implement, people do not really follow it in the ground, and if they're not in a proper monitoring system, they could be health risk for the consumers as well. But there are, at the same time, significant social and environmental benefits from reduced pollution to water bodies, enhanced soil fertility, blah blah blah, and improvement in security and jobs to poor. But there's at a very generic level. What we then next tried to do was, we developed so many business models, and if I go on producing, I'll take next entire day, maybe whole conference, set time here. So we tried to broadly classify the business model into 3 categories. One was based on the toilet accessibility plus the type of toilet. So basically you have the easy to access toilet, which is mainly done by the mechanical vacuum cleaners, and which are these, you all know it very well. And then the difficult to access bits, or the single VIPs and so on. Here you use the augers and gulpers, and at the same time you have the transportation, the transfer station model in there. I will not go to present here in detail about this specific, because there are plenty of other presentations we have seen who have covered business models on these. What I'll focus primarily in the presentation is a little bit on the institutional side of the fecal sludge management, how the structure looks, and on the reuse side. And in the reuse, I'm more focusing on nutrient recovery and energy recovery. And I'll highlight why, going forward, what's the reason I'm doing that. So, coming to the institutional structure. In a business as usual setup, this is what we are seeing in most of the cities and towns, where the household invests in the toilet, it pays a separation treatment tax to a water and sewerage utility, which could be a public or private entity, predominantly public, and then there is a private entrepreneur who does the desludging of the fecal sludge from the household, and then household is paying an emptying charge. Now this private entrepreneur at the same time is responsible to go and deliver the fecal sludge to the water and sewerage utility. They invest their own capital and whatever, but we all know that there has been large amount of indiscriminate dumping that they are doing as well. We've also seen cases where private entrepreneurs and farmers are having a collaboration, and where the private entrepreneurs delivers these business to a farmer's site, and the farmer is paying a very small amount of a dumping charge, and farmer is mainly using that as a compost. And the water and sewerage utility, their costs are mainly the operation and maintenance to treat the fecal sludge, and the sludge that is collected, which is left in the drying beds there, they are typically sent for landfill. But there also we've seen cases where farmers are coming to these treatment plants and collecting the sludge for a fee. But that was as a business as usual scenario. But we've tried to develop our own cases and also seen on the ground where this kind of scenario works, where water and sewerage utility is the one which is also doing the collection of sludge, and overall this can be done by both public sector or private sector. So it's the same as the previous business as usual scenario, but the interesting one that we're gradually seeing is the public-private partnership mix that is coming in the sector, where one of the interesting things is sewerage fee is being collected under the water bill itself by the water and sewerage utility. The water and sewerage utility does contracting of doing a scheduled desludging to private entrepreneurs. The private entrepreneurs also are responsible for unscheduled emptying, for which the household has to pay a separate amount. And the private entrepreneur who delivers the fecal sludge to the treatment plant has to pay a tipping fees for delivering for the treatment of the sludge. And again, the other scenarios are same as the business as usual. And at the same time, farmer is still collecting the dried sludge from the treatment plant. One interesting thing, that variation that has been observed, is in the private entrepreneur space, where the vacuum truck operators, they have formed their own association, and this association is trying to get these contracts. Plus, there have been, we have developed our own hypothetical scenario where this kind of association could become a monitoring agency. Just 2 minutes? Oh wow, I need to just rush. Okay, so broadly I wanted to touch more on the reuse of Faecal Sludge business models. Since I have not much time, I'm going to just talk about some of the reuse Faecal Sludge business model that we still seen was doing the co-composting. If you are more interested about the co-composting business model, there is publication books here which we are trying to implement in India, Ghana, and many places. And similarly, we have seen the vacuum truck operator. I'm going to explain a little bit more here, but I'll go directly to the most interesting part where you all want to kind of ask me more questions or kill me. And this is what we saw when we analyzed many different business cases. This is what the numbers that we got, how much tons of waste they were processing, what is the production happening, what is the overall investment cost, required O&M and revenue. Primarily we saw most of them were highly successful business cases. I know this is not giving you an immediate clear shot, but to make a life clear, this is what we observed. Typically used products, compost was sold at anywhere between $3 to $5 for a 50 kg bag. Cost of investment, the treatment for reuse, mainly fell around $150 to $250 per household. Energy recovery came to about $50 per household. When you look at the operational and maintenance cost, it came to about $2 to $7 per household per month. And we know already the Faecal Sludge collection and emptying cost. So when you look at overall, the reuse component, when they were selling these reuse products, O&M cost was significantly covered in a good number of highly successful cases. Complete O&M cost was covered. Plus, there was some amount they could cover for the Faecal Sludge and empty. So the key takeaway messages that I will highlight from what we have done in our research is, I will ignore the first, avoid cost failure, because you all know what they are. Mainly I want to touch is looking at incorporating reuse. You have to look at incorporating reuse, and this thing is funny, incorporating reuse in your treatment from the start of the design. But when you do incorporate, I think so. I'm so sorry. Okay, our conclusion, what I would say is also, when you're looking at reuse, you have to start looking at it also, thinking beyond sanitation. What we have seen is, in most of the business cases, you have to look at partnership on the side where you are looking at beyond sanitation, from the side that you have to look at partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture, or you have to look at partnership with industry, because that's where your reuse mainly fits in. You have to start moving away from that. The sanitation service delivery chain just ends at the reuse the way we are showing right now. That's, thank you.
Very good presentation, but unfortunately the time is one of the.
I didn't.
Let us then move on to Martin Morenga. Martin's going to talk about a case study in Kanyama on Faecal Sludge management by the auditors. Most of you might know Martin from the University of Delft, IHE. He has years of experience in water and sanitation.
There it is. Marvelous. Okay, I'll try and be quick and to the point. 10 minutes or whatever is not very long, but I'll try and give you a video version of what I could give you if I had more time. Let me first introduce who we are. When I say we, the broader group. I come from a company called Bantu Services, and we have a company which is a subsidiary which we created about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, called Impilo Bantu Services. There's the logo at the bottom. That company was specifically put into place to act as a franchise for what I would call rural and developing areas sanitation services. Okay, and I'll explain to you a little bit later through the presentation what the franchise is. Can you go back, please, just one slide? Okay, never mind. Okay, the background to this, in 2010 at the FSM we introduced a pilot that we started out to try and pilot this whole social franchising approach. And in 2012 we reported back on the pilot. that we had found success factors. It was a small pilot. It involved school sanitation predominantly, as well as some households. But we had learned in the field over a period of about 3 years about how to actually run this business with small micro enterprises. Can you go back a slide, please? It mustn't go by itself, though. Okay, that's it. All right, and in Durban 2 years ago, we actually also just summarized the case study. But this time around, I'm talking about more the principles about franchising and just to give you some outcomes as to what we've been doing in that sector. Next slide, please. Just a quick definition. We like to use the term social franchising. It's not where we started. We started looking at franchising in the water services sector. I don't know what's happening to my presentation here. You're just jumping the slides here. Okay. All right. Just the definition of social franchising. It's really it's a type of franchising which actually has got socially beneficial ends, and that quote is really what we've based our definition on. We are a business. We're a for-profit business, but we certainly see the element of social because it's for the poor, and it's basic services. Commercial franchising, on the other hand, is when a franchisor can enter into an agreement with franchisees by granting them certain rights, and it's a partnership basically to provide services against or goods against the business model. Next slide, please. All right, essentially, you've got three parties, as I said. You've got the franchisor, franchisees, and the customer. In our case, the franchisor holds and holds the technology and understanding of the business, and then through a contract, which is a partnership, it's a business-to-business partnership. It grants to the franchisor and supports the franchisor through a hard contractual arrangement, but it's a partnership agreement, certain rights and privileges. And there they are. There's the support functions that are given. There's a whole list of them, and there's more than that, where the franchisor then does its business through the franchisees. In the case of this model that we've developed, it's specifically towards the water sector, and in this case, a lot of sanitation to the poor. Button, please. We have down. Next one. Okay. And for that, the franchisee typically provides the service for payment to the customer. And there's various types of ways that the arrangement can be done, and I'll show you an example a bit later. Next one. Okay, and of course, going along with this is the whole question of branding, customer confidence, and the image of the business collectively, not just a small business trying to do it by themselves. They're in business for themselves, but they're not by themselves out there. They come with a brand, they come with a product. And then, of course, there's systems, loyalty, which is based on the perceptions of the clients out there regarding confidence, trust in the brand itself. Branding is something we often miss in what we're doing in the water sector, I must say. Next slide, please. Okay, next one. Yeah. Okay. Recent developments. There's a map of South Africa behind there. That's where we're operating on the southeast side of Africa, of southern Africa. I don't know what's going on. Is that the previous slide? Okay. Sorry, it's a bit difficult here. Okay, but we entered into a contract with the Department of Water Affairs in South Africa, where they actually extended our contract to give us 1,300 odd schools in 4 districts to service, and that gave us a good baseline to go out on a programmatic basis, and we then have now trained up 22 franchisees to do that work. That's typically just an organogram showing you that particular program, and in this case of this program, the franchisor effectively holds the main contract and runs a program with its 22 franchisees. It's not always the case like that. In many cases, you might find a franchisee in their own specific area would then go to a client directly, get paid and so on, but they would have back-to-back service free with the franchisor themselves. Next one, please. Okay, just summarize the outcomes, because I know Jay's going to stop me just now. But I've mentioned the 22 franchisees. We started with 5. The 5 original ones are still there. Now we've got 22. They're in the field, they're working. And typically a franchisee is a micro business who employs somewhere between 5 and maybe 15 staff, depending on the work that we have done. And then, of course, the type of work they're doing is very hands-on. Typically, it's removal of sludge, it's servicing of facilities, it's trying to make sure that in this case, the school's facilities But in other cases, it might be households, it might be a service station, it might be a clinic, that the facilities remain in good working order. And for on-site systems, clearly there's a whole question of fecal sludge. That's why I'm here as well. Next slide, please. Okay, in a nutshell, there we've got some of the achievements that we see, particularly in the schools sanitation. There's a marked benefit to these schools. A lot of the rural schools in Southern Africa and Africa as a whole have actually appalling circumstances that they have in their sanitation facilities and toilets and water. And in this case, we've been able to send teams in who can work according to certain procedures and try and keep a standard out there in maintaining and servicing these schools. I'm not sure where we are now. Anyway. Coming out of it a series of lessons, and I won't go into all the details here, but some of the highlights are that the ability to select the franchisees is not coming through a tender or public procurement process. It's a partnership process where the franchisor actually interviews. They know what makes a good franchisee. They will put it out there, and we're actually targeting the poorest of the poor. So at the bottom of the pyramid, we're looking at typically people who are entrepreneurial, who can come along, show the right, the right skills and so on, and the willingness, and they're brought into the fold, and they start their business. A lot of them don't have cash, so we have to actually raise capital for them. They, in South African terms, about 400 rand. It's probably about $50 or so to start up their business. They just need a loan to actually get going, and we can help them with that. And then, of course, the way the business operates must be simple, must be outcomes-based, so that the measurements, they can do it in remote areas, they don't need someone looking over their shoulder. Measurements is very simple, and they can run their business accordingly. Next slide, please. Of course, the whole question of skills development, it works both ways. It's in the franchise's interest as a whole. The franchisees know the business, understand the procedures, can do their job properly, and of course the franchisees they're very recipient to this. To them, they're proud, they're in business for the first time, and so they're developing themselves as entrepreneurs and in business. So we place a lot of emphasis on that. Most of the learning, by the way, is not sitting in classrooms. It's actually on the job where the supervisors come around, franchisees get together in an area, maybe 5 of them are in a district, they get together, they meet once a week, once every 2 weeks, they go through how they're running their jobs, sharing with each other, and they're not necessarily competing with each other because they're geographically located. Next slide, please. Okay, thanks. I'll need you there. Okay, and besides the schools, we're also servicing rural VIPs. We have contracts with Buffalo City, which is peri-urban rather than what I call slums type work. So there's typically what you would see. In this case, they jack the whole toilet up, move it aside, take the fecal sludge out, service it, and reinstate the toilet. And there's various others. Bearing in mind that there's a whole range of sludge classifications, some are wet, some are dry, circumstances are such that they really have to be able to handle anything that comes their way. They need to go sometimes through difficult access points, and then of course the whole question of how do you get it out, how do you carry it, how do you transport it. These are the lessons we're trying to actually pass on to the franchisees. Next slide, please. And of course, safe handling. In this case, we do certain times use irrigation where it's very wet and areas are cut off. But one has to be extremely careful and have agreements with local government as to what is and what is not acceptable. Next slide, please. Okay, sludge. I just wanted to show you that we're actually going down the route of entrenchment and beneficiation. We're finding that it is you don't want people dumping sludges in rivers and that sort of thing. So we don't add water if we can help it, because that we see as a pollution hazard. So we typically will take the sludge out as thick as it can be, and we will try and actually find an area where we can actually control it and close it off. And typically not to travel a long distance, because cost is a primary factor as well. But it's got to be done within a specified approach. Next slide, please. Okay, they do use the use of lime. It's obviously not a high-power disinfectant, but it does help with fly control, etc. In closing out trenches, and of course tree planting. Next slide, please. That's becoming more popular with us now. Okay, next slide. Just one last thing before I close out is that one of the advantages of having a collective of numerous small businesses is you can actually equip these businesses to do much better work than they would if they're just a standalone business. And what we've done is we've developed an application where it's on tablets. They can actually GPS, they can take photographs before and after, and we can capture data. Now the client likes that because it tells the client today, as soon as they're within range, what the status of that facility is. So you can mine into databases at any one stage. It helps us, it helps the business. So there's a lot of information that you can do, but you can only do that as you have a collection and a system behind you. Next slide, please. Okay, there we go. Conclusions. Hope I've kept to time. The key points: standardization and regulation of the service itself. Self-regulation is very important within a franchise environment because your brand and your image goes with it. Job creation, local economic development, that's a big plus. And we are looking at the bottom of the pyramid, hence the social side of it. These franchisees are serving their own communities. In South Africa, we might have to go 3 hours drive to get out there. We're saying we want somebody there who comes from that community to provide that local service. And they can carry the same brand, and they can be their own boss. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and sorry about the technical mishap earlier. I'm Martin Vlega from SY3, the Institute for Water Education in the Netherlands. And my co-presenter was not being able to make it. Is Mr. Dennis Malambo, who works for the Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company. This is in Zambia. And the Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company is actually part of the initiative that I'm going to talk about. And this initiative is kind of similar to some of the things that people have already spoken about. It is about the new management model that's being tried in Zambia, to undertake fecal sludge management in the low-cost income settlements. So just to give you a quick background, Zambia has a population of 13.7 million, and out of that, only 56% of the urban population has access to improved sanitation facilities. And Lusaka, the city that this initiative focuses on, which is the capital of Zambia, 65% of the people there live in informal settlements. And in the informal settlements, over 90% of the people living there depend on on-site sanitation systems. But unfortunately, most of these sanitation systems are poorly designed and poorly constructed and managed. And there is very little or no fecal sludge management in most of these areas. So the few pit latrines that are emptied, they are emptied, by informal pit emptiers and just discharged in all sorts of places. So, what's the responsibility of sanitation in Zambia? According to the decentralization policy of the country, the local authorities are mandated to provide sanitation services, water and sanitation services to all the people in their jurisdiction. And they do so through commercial water utilities, which are fully owned by the local or city councils. So, but sadly, in as much as these commercial utilities are mandated to provide water supply and sanitation services to everybody, they don't extend sanitation services to most of the urban poor communities. They tend to focus only on water supply, and they do that through water trusts, and water trusts are community-based organizations that are made up of the community members water utilities, NGOs, and other key stakeholders. And the idea behind the trust is to manage water facilities on behalf of the commercial utility, because it's obviously difficult for the commercial utilities to run water supply services in these settlements, because not everyone is connected to the service. So people depend on water kiosks, and these kiosks are managed at a community level by water trusts. So and now, recently, a new initiative was developed by Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor, which is a UK-based organization, in partnership with the SuSanA Water and Storage Company. They realized that very little was being done in terms of the provision of sanitation in the low-income areas. So they got a trust in the country. It was initially started by Care International in 2002, and it has worked very, very effectively. They've been able to manage a number of community initiatives. So it was quite ideal for water sanitation for the SuSanA Water and Storage Company to target this particular trust. And not only that, this same informal settlement has major sanitation problems. The majority of people living there are poor, so they cannot afford to pay for decent services. And the majority of people there, have not been able to empty their pits, once they fill them. So the aim of this initiative is to provide an affordable but sustainable service to the people in this informal settlement, as well as to make it a model so that it can be used in other places as well. And we try to do this by putting in place decentralized primary and secondary treatment, which leads to the production of biogas, fertilizer, and soil conditioner. So, this is the process that they went through in order to achieve the aim of putting in place the fecal sludge management system in this particular settlement. So they started by mobilizing the communities, and they carried out surveys, because it's obviously important, for a fecal sludge management service to work, you need to have the support of the communities. So what they did was to talk about, they went to the communities through community theater, and spoke to the people about the planned initiative, and then they also carried out surveys, so that they could find out the people's ability to pay for example, as well as to see, the sort of systems that were in place. And like I've mentioned before, the majority of people actually depend on on-site sanitation system. So like in this particular informal settlement, imagine it's more like a city. It's got 250,000 people, right? And yet it is an informal settlement. So 80% of the people at least have toilets, except that the toilets are nothing much to write home about. And 95% of those are people trees. And of course, the surveys showed that there was demand for fecal sludge management service, because most of the people do not have alternatives. But surprisingly, the majority of the people who said they were willing to pay for this service were actually the homeowners. The tenants, as you can imagine, were not so keen, and at least 45% of the tenants in the community said they were not willing to do so, because they said they did not have the security that if they paid for these services, the landlord would not kick them out. And a number of tools were tried. They tried the use of the GAUPA, as well as modified manual tools. And according to the calculation, they found that to empty a pit latrine, which would say amount to 1260 liter barrels, it would cost at least $38 or 250 Zambian kwacha. And for a 24 60-liter barrels, it cost 380. And to break even, they found that at least they needed to empty at least 30 pits per month. And one of the things that they realized went to their advantage was the fact that they were working through an established water trust, which was already in place, which had worked already very, very effectively. And so this is once the system was put in place, this is what they've been able to do. At least they've been able to empty the pits, using the Gaupa in situations where they're able to. In other places, it's very difficult to use the Gaupa because some of the pits have not been emptied for several years. So the sludge has thickened, so it becomes very, very difficult. So in such cases, they use manual tools. And then, of course, they also transport the waste manually using tricycles and carts to the treatment plant with the biodigester as well as an underground transfer tank, which is actually within the same settlement. And of course, the advantage of that is that it cuts down on the transportation costs. First of all, they use manual tools, which again cuts out the cost of bringing in vacuum tankers, any of which a service that most of the people cannot afford. And then they have in place these facilities. And once some form of treatment has taken place, some of the biosolids are taken to drying beds, and then afterwards the dried material is used as agriculture. And the more liquid waste is also used within the area to water the plants. So what are the different roles of for the players? So you find that in this model we've got the water trust itself, the community-based water trust. So what these people do is that they actually, if anything, they actually run the show. They manage the Faecal management business on behalf of the Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company, which is responsible for the service, for the provision of the service. And so they deal with the finances, people pay them, they do the monitoring, they also do the infrastructure maintenance, they recruit the pit emptiers, as well as do the marketing. Sorry, let's go back. Yeah. Okay, forward. Okay, yes. And then the pit emptiers, of course, they have to empty the pits using they use modified manual tools or the Gaupa wherever feasible. And they also have to transport the waste. And they also man the biodigester and they do the separation of the solid waste and the sludge at the sludge digester. And they also participate in the promotion. Yes, I'm concluding. Yeah. So what has been found so far is that actually the initiative looks very promising, and especially in a country where no form of fecal sludge management existed at all. So this initiative started as a pilot, but it has proved to be effective. They could do better, but at least it's showing signs of success. And so they are about to replicate it to another informal settlement in SuSanA, called SuSanA, which has a population of about 80,000 people. And so far, nearly 700 pits have been emptied. That is servicing at least 10,000 residents. And so far, the capacity of the infrastructure in place can cater for 50,000 residents. And of course, the setting up of tariffs is a challenge, considering that this area focuses, this area is a low income area. But above all, the most important thing about this initiative is that it's a model that, first of all, shows that the problem of sanitation is finally being acknowledged, at least by the commercial utilities in the country, and slowly but surely, other utilities in other cities are beginning to see, the need to take up the initiative, as well as to take up the responsibility that they have in the first place. So I end here. Thank you.
We will move on then to Scenario from PTS.
Thank you, Jay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, my presentation here, the title of my presentation is Control System for Fecal Solid Management Improvement in Education. I'm preparing the presentation together with my colleague Bidar Muhammad from the USP and Fani Yadawutama from the National Development Plan. Okay, this is the generic fecal sludge management practice in Indonesia, and divided into three volumes. One is septic tank, sludge truck, and solid sludge plant. The condition now is the septic tank is non-standard construction. The sludge initiative from the owner, usually only when it blockage, and then the household pay directly to the truck driver with relatively high payment. Next. Then the sludge truck itself come to visit the house based on call basis. Lack of operation supervision from the local government, it is done by the private sector, because how to supervise it, because so many with limited staff, where they pick up and where they damage, difficult to be supervised. The number of truck is not according to the requirement, because even what is actually the actual requirement is not clear. Next, please. Well, the incoming sludge is not in line with the collecting sludge, because most of the private sector sometimes they dump it into the river, and then the sludge treatment itself is underutilized. From 146 sludge treatment plant in Indonesia, only 10% goes well, and this charge fee paid directly to the sludge treatment plant operators. Next. This information is available on-site system, public communal system, where this is under the local government, different. But communal system where it is under the community, this is follow this. Next. Well, the consequence is groundwater pollution, because the detention times then so limited, and also groundwater pollution. Sludge production is below the design for the STP. Previously, the design is okay. So many households has to be covered and divided for consider 2 years. Then you have to meet a certain volume of STP. But without any sludge produced, then the design is too much bigger. And then low effluent quality. household suspend this sludging itself, because first it's the responsibility of the household to inform where they have to be collected, maybe because of charge, and usually, of course, they don't remember when it has to be collected. The sludge collector is passive, based on all basis, and non-proactive. Illegal discharge to water body and STP is unused less and constrained due to limited budget for the operation maintenance. This is the target for the improvement. Improve septic tank technical quality. Customer application, they have to pay monthly fee, and the sludging, if they have paid, they have to feel they have the right to receive the service. It's important also that for the local government, they are not the one who has, they cannot stand any longer. Well, you need service from us, you have to come. No, they have to consider the customer as the one who pay money. Next, please. And then regular discharging itself has to be initiated by sludge collector operator, and by that, if you know every 2 years this for how many septic tanks have to be collected, then it is interesting business for the private. And to prevent illegal discharge itself, because previously it's always now also that the local government used to look for where the trucks going on, it's better to shift it to the management of the private sector, so they can get paid if they can prove that they already collected. So it shifted the prevent the illegal discharge to the management of the private sector, and fully utilized in the markets. Incoming sludge collecting sludge and the aid for the suction jet for the UN. What are the schemes? There are two schemes. I push here. One is used for gas, and the more sophisticated one is web-based system. We used here barcode reader and barcode scanner. We use these two for the water supply in Tarakan, together with Lumea water company from Netherlands and company from the Netherlands. Okay, next please. Well, yeah. Monthly fee, next. For cars, next. Dislodging regular, next. Free sign cars given to the private or public institution. Discharge and STP, next. 2 verified cards from the operator here, and then next. One for the invoice, next. So the payment you see only the monthly fee, or no payment here and no payment here. No, that's okay. Then the local government institutions has to pay, has to provide the OM cost. Next. The second one, okay, next. Monthly fee as usual, discharging regular, and by using this, there's barcode here in the household, maybe also combined with the one barcode used for the water supply water in the water meter, send the data via internet the local government institution. Discharge, when they discharge it, they put also the operator here can scan the barcode of the truck driver, send here, and by that actually the local government already can prepare the bill. If the monthly fees cannot cover the 2 years, every 2 years discharging, then they already know this additional charge has to be given. So the next month when they come, they already with the bill. This is the additional. They can send inform in advance by sending SMS. You have been your sludge has been collected, so next month you need another something. And this is common payment. Okay, next. This is the scheme that I proposed. Next. Okay, there's you. One regulation is required for regular dislodging. It has to be set up there. Whatever the condition of the septic tank, but set the system first. Clear responsible for institutional for sludge management. The problem in Indonesia now is with the one that has the responsibility for checking the septic tank condition is different with the one that has responsibility for supervising the transportation as well as the distance sludge treatment plant. And sometimes there's no coordination among themselves. So that's why it's need to have one clear response institution that is going from the beginning from the septic tank until the septic treatment plant. Next. Okay, database of septic tanks is important. It's okay, technical everything is important, but without improved customer administration, you will get nothing. From water supply, you learn if you don't improve, then you lose the potential of income. Next. Proactive flush operator. Next. Prevent illegal discharge, I told you already, shift the responsibility to the minutes of the flush operator. Collector. Customers should feel regularly sludging is their right instead of obligation after they pay monthly fee. And then, supposedly step by step improve septic tank condition, and then of course campaign and advocacy. You have to pay and you will get discount, or you don't have to pay at once when you have this one. Okay. Thank you for your attention. Next.
That's some very valuable time. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to the last presentation, and that's on the third quarter that is applied in Latin America. Marcos Villavanti from Ecuador, coming very briefly.
Good afternoon. I'm Marco Fioranti from SuSanA. This is we are as SuSanA grantee and the Linda Gates Foundation. Testing and introducing Latin America's market of technology centralized sanitation. So we are working with critical practices in co-developing a decentralized and ecological urine-diverted dry toilet with the goal of starting product commercialization before 2016. Current results include initial evaluation of first installed units. This is very fresh information that we have been collecting the last 3 weeks, and we have some preliminary approach to the market analysis, pricing, value chain, and findings. So some introduction. It's a 100% decentralized urine diverting dry toilet, easy to use, attractive look and feel. It doesn't use or pollute water. It's off the grid and it produces plant fertilizer. In some contexts cannot be 100%, especially in high density areas where you could probably need a network for some inputs and for harvesting the toilet. So how it works? First, the daily use perspective. What users find is just a toilet seat. And you defecate, press the pedal with your foot and push the lever with your arm. And we like that it's hands-free, so we avoid exposure that way. This is what the users find in the instructions, how to use it. And we encourage them not to use the hands, but the arm. It's a urine diverter, so urines go through a urine diverting system, and also it has a seal that also diverts urine, so it's like a female urinal, but also some men are using it. This is what users find. This is an example of a unit. How it works, what's behind. So when you press the pedal, the other inside moves the purpose or the compost, and it mixes, oxygenate, and moves forward slowly through the pipe. So that's what we say is the phase 1. And it's for composting and dehydration. And the material gets the exit with around 20 to 40% of moisture content. but then you need additional treatment for pathogen die-off. We are currently monitoring storage effective time to keep the pathogens from dehydration, but we are also testing other approaches like solar heating and ammonia treatment. These are some pictures of how we are getting the compost. And these are some images of the instructions that the users have for harvesting the material. These are some pictures of the different housing approach that we are doing, that's bamboo or composite wood. And you can see also a very hot weather in the left and a highland with very cold weather in the right. These are other units, more fancy, with different material required by the government because they wanted more durability on housing approach. And also that housing has rainwater collection and infiltration of urine and grey-water after hand washing. So it's more than a toilet, and that's important for them. Installation is very easy, as you can see in the pictures. And we are now approaching the activation. It's what we call when we deliver a toilet and we train them how to use it in order to make it as simple as possible. So we are going to talk now a little bit on what feedback are we getting from the field. But this is very early information that we have been collecting. In the map in the left, you can see the darker areas in Ecuador are where more lack of sanitation we have. And we have been focusing the demonstrations in order to have diversity in weather and cultural conditions, but also we are working with counterparts. And the counterparts have appeared naturally in the areas where there's not good statistics in sanitation or good sanitation coverage. So we interviewed 31. We have now 86 units installed, but only 42 activated and 33 in use. And we did last week's 31 surveys. And you can see how many females and males. We normally interview females because they are the most interested in this subject, and also because males are normally working. We have some indicators on acceptability. From the 42 toilets, 79% are underused. And that 21% is because it sometimes takes some time for them to start using it. But with the previous prototype, we have 22% of use. So it's a big increase in acceptability in that case. Also, we asked them if they like their ecological toilet better than the previous, and 19% said yes. We also asked them if they are still using the previous toilet or the pit latrine that they had, and 80% said no. Said yes. No, said no, sorry. Some important learning from the field. Users' adaptation to the new toilet takes something like 3 to 6 months. After 2 months, all the family members start using the toilet, and they also start fixing problems by themselves. We had a big job in approaching the education process, because it's a different toilet, and you not only need to learn how to use it, but also how to harvest. And we have learned that it's better to focus on the training process in avoiding exposure to pathogens, and little instructions in how to use it. Because we have learned that they find a way to use it, but sometimes they do mistakes regarding to the pathogen exposure. So it's the takeaway message must be how to avoid pathogen exposure. We have no odors or fly problems. We have not found strange objects in the toilet, which is a big achievement. And we need to collect more data of their experience in harvesting and using compost that we will have in the following weeks. So the value chain would look like this. The units are manufactured in China and shipped to Ecuador, and we locally are doing custom clearance, assembly, sales, installation, service, and maintenance. The goal is now to create a certified installers network that could manage that part of the value chain, and they would also be potential sellers. This is how the market looks. In Ecuador, we have 3 million people without access to sanitation, 22% of the population, and in the rural area, it's almost the half of the people. We ran 3 focus groups during the last 3 weeks, and we found some important learning. The current situation is that they spend between $120 to $500 in construction latrines, including housing. The demand, they would like to invest from $50 to $600 for the ideal toilet, but when they demand the ideal bathroom, they demand very high aspirational features, like a mirror, a water sink, a shower. That's what they want to invest for. And about the prototype, they like a lot the look and feel. They have some concerns on sawdust or cover material provision and payment. They dislike having to harvest and would rather connect it to a pit, latrine. And they assume that when we ask them how much would you pay, I must say that these were people that is not paying, is not using the toilet. They wash the toilet for the first time. And they say, I would pay from 50, we have answered from $50 to $300. The main reason to buy is saving money on water and being able to use it when it's scarce, and prefer to buy it with housing that includes sink, shower, mirror, and others. These are very early approaches to the cost analysis. They could be on $400 as the cost analysis looks now. But we think that in the future, we have several ways to reduce that cost. In example, with local production of parts, we could take $200 to $80, and also accessing better prices because of volume. We increase the volume of the project, we could reduce that almost to the half, and we could have some cost dilution in central cost. So we could have a unit that costs $200 for the final use. We are also approaching and having some agreement signed with microfinance organizations. So if we achieve a $200 price for the unit, we could have a monthly fee of $9 paid in 24 months, and that would be 7 cents per person per day. Including housing, the cheapest option, only materials without installation, would be $500, and that means 70 cents per person per day. Some positive inputs in terms of road to market and indicators on demand. Several state and county governments are interested. We have already signed with more than 5 authorities, state authorities and also the national government. We have signed agreements. We have also an approval from the National Environmental Ministry, which is a big success considering that this is a country where we don't have a legal framework for decentralized sanitation. So we had to introduce the whole concept and approach. Thank you.
Thank you all. Our presenters will come to the front, and we will open up the floor for any generic questions on all the presentations or very specific ones to the individual. We've got about 15 minutes, and within that time we also have to think about the 3 takeaways from the session. We'll just get a show of hands. Okay, one thing. There's one at the back.
Hi, two questions on the first presentation.
Don't use the mouth. It's radioactive. Maybe it's true.
Two questions on accessing communication. First question was, have you talked about cost recovery of the franchiser? Second thing, early learning we are having in Bihar, India, ongoing, both Faecal Sludge and Sanitation is that branding is potentially a market entry barrier, developing the markets. Thoughts on that would be good.
Let's just take two questions. The question was directed to you. Do you want to come?
When we are concerned in fecal cellulose management, we have to remember that source, collection, transportation, treatment, use or reuse, and finally disposal. So this is the chain, management chain. Organic compost from fecal cellulose may contain unacceptable materials. So before use this type of compost, it should be certified by the competent authority. Even to discharge wastewater from fecal cellulose treatment plant, standard should be maintained. Are the compost complying with that standard, and is it certified by the authority? So question is open, so anyone can answer.
Let's take one more.
Hi, I'm Raful. I'm from Bangladesh. I work with Practical Election Bangladesh. So I have two questions specific to first presenter and second presenter. To the first presenter who presented a generic business model, I'd like to know the his business model, what he has presented. Actually, I'd like to know about the scale. Actually, how many customers, or what about the circulation of the money, and what about the return period he is actually thinking or proposing in his presentation. And to the second presenter who presented franchise model, I'd like to know about the return period, date of return. Thank you.
Okay, let's start.
Okay, first I'll respond to your question on the compost regulation. What we have seen in countries like Ghana, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and even to even here in Vietnam, when you look at fecal sludge-based compost, it is as long as in the institution regulation it doesn't mention that fecal sludge reuse is illegal, it is fine. But nowhere the term does not really appear. Even in the case of Bangladesh right now, as I understand, BRAC and likely waste enterprises, two of them are trying to even get their fecal sludge-based compost registered with the authorities. So in terms of meeting the standards, we have done thorough testing of converting fecal sludge into compost, and even doing mixing it with other materials like the solid waste, sawdust, etc. And even with the municipal solid waste. In most of the cases, we have not have the final standards to meet the required WHO standards. In the case of India, we have seen the standards have met what the Indian government requires. I know in the case of Bangladesh, there is always risk of heavy metal, especially when you mix it with the municipal solid waste. And Bangladesh has a very, very stringent compared to other South Asian countries, the heavy metal standards. We did not test it with municipal solid waste, but we did it with regular sawdust, and we were meeting the standards as required by the Bangladesh regulations too. Even in Sri Lanka, where we have seen the government actually, a municipality who is making co-compost and is selling to the farmers, and it's the government itself who is running the show. And even in that case, we've tested and the standards are being met. The only question that I have seen is in that particular case, the pathogen risks are still slightly present because they're not doing a thorough process. They're not following completely, in technological sense, doing a proper composting. That was for your response. I think the other gentleman, you had asked about the scale. of the business model. See, what we did this study was we actually looked at the business cases where reuse was actually being done, and some of and these were successful business cases which have been operating at least for anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And in most of these cases where we've seen reuse, they all did start as a pilot. The biggest scale that we saw was serving for 40,000 population, and the one that I presented. We've seen bigger than that, but the biggest one which is successfully running was 40,000 population. And in terms of your other question was what is the payback? So the payback is a function of how you see it in terms of you're looking at the investment cost recovery. Most of them did have a subsidy for the capital cost. But when you look at solely from the operational and maintenance cost, majority were able to recover their operational and maintenance cost, which was the key aspect. And they were able to make some additional money. There have been one case of especially providing public toilet at the same time generating biogas. There the payback was for 3 to 5 years. But there, I wouldn't say reuse was the key component for improving their payback. It was because of the toilet fees itself were pretty good enough that they were able to recover it in 3 to 5 years. But I wouldn't really talk much about from the investment perspective payback. It's more the operation and maintenance that I would say.
Can I add to that? Okay. Just from the franchising perspective, there were a couple of questions also relating to what my colleague has just been expounding on further. The one question came up was costs and branding, and then the other question was rates of return. Same question that you were dealing with. From a business perspective, clearly from the franchise, we have to keep the barrier to entry down for small businesses as much as possible. We've got to reduce the payback periods that their investment might be. We try and keep it to less than 3 years because that's typically the type of contractual period we actually are talking about with our clients who are the authorities. And there are ways of doing that. One of the ways we do to try and reduce their capital is to actually maybe put more emphasis on running a centralized plant department if we need to get any sophisticated equipment which can then be hired out through the franchise to individual franchisees. That's one way to reduce the burden on the franchisee. We cannot reduce their burden when it comes to things like vehicles, working vehicles and that sort of thing. So their primary capital injection is actually vehicles and tools and equipment basically that they need. And the model work, we've done extensive models. Clearly we've gone to scale in many ways. Just regarding the branding, I indicated that each of these small entities see themselves as part of a bigger organization, a club. They carry the same brand. They wear overalls. They've got the logo. Although they're trading as separate entities, they're signing a franchise agreement, which compels them to operate in a certain way, and we can then regulate. So the repercussions are quite harsh if they don't follow a procedure. The procedures we have are open to our clients to look at in terms of the way they do the work and how they should leave the site and what the level of standard should be. And that's where the self-regulation starts coming in. So the brand is very important actually. It ties, it's a symbol of tying that group together and a standard that goes with it. Yeah, I think I've said enough at the moment.
Any more questions? There's one at the back. I need some athletes here.
I mean, I can also speak very loudly.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sasha Kramer from Soil in Haiti, and I'm curious when you talk about here we go. Now I won't yell anymore. I'm curious when you speak about the repercussions for franchisees that perform poorly. What exactly are those? How do you actually do that?
Yeah, I have a question to Mr. Ali. You were talking about the social franchising, you were talking about site identification, sludging, developing brands, etc. It's all about social trials. How would you integrate the local authorities in this process? Because in the subcontinent, local authorities and municipalities have the sole responsibility to do all the things, site selection, dislodging, even fixing the fries, right? So it's very important. You have to ask the local authority or to integrate them in some way. What about your solution? Thank you.
Okay, the same, okay, let's just get, the first question was regarding,
What happens to the brand trade?
Okay, the repercussions, and then of course the other one which has just been asked. Okay. Regarding the repercussions, yes, they're commercial primarily, if I can call it that. If a franchisee contravenes an agreement, which is a contract, remember they're putting the entire franchise in jeopardy in terms of the brand. So, there are dispute resolution clauses and various other clauses within the contract where we can take actual commercial control on that one. There is definitely teeth. And when it comes to the authority, I think it's linked in some ways to that, the whole question of regulation, responsibility, and who does the work. Yes, franchising is an outsourcing, but it's certainly not an outsourcing of the obligation and responsibility of the authority. In South Africa, it's very similar to what you have, where the authority, being the local authority or whoever's responsible for that service, cannot just leave it and delegate it to somebody else. The difference is that these authorities, be they boards, local governments, they can utilize small businesses, as we've seen some of the models coming out, in a manner where they can engage confidently with the lowest of the low in terms of the pyramid, of the economic pyramid. But yet they can maintain through the brand quality and an identification of specification that is clear for them to operate within. So we see that as the mechanism that gives benefit to local authorities. It's a tool in the hand of local authority, rather than trying to do away with the job. So the franchise can expand a lot quicker than normal business can as a standalone because of its replicability as a model. And that's really what we're trying to achieve. Plus, of course, there's more. A lot of the authorities we deal with say we don't want to deal with that small guy who wants to deal with the franchise because they can have more teeth that way. And there's more resilience, economic resilience to fluctuations in work and so on. So the franchisor effectively can buffer that small business from some of the late payments and all the other things that come through to a point with local authorities' constraints in dealing directly with small business.
Okay. Does that answer your question? I'm tempted to sort of chip in as a chair, but I don't want to take the bank away. But just using the analogy of the franchising concept, like the McDonald's burger. You may own the franchise, but you don't run the store. McDonald's runs it, they won't pay for you. So they know how many burgers they supply, how many you selling, when they do replacement. So if a manager in the store is buying products that are not supplied by McDonald's, they pick it up very quickly. And if one customer has to complain, they shut the branch down. So that kind of regulation is very strong. Still use the analogy. Any other questions?
This is a short question to Indonesia experience. One thing I did not get, how much the household is paying monthly and what is the system? And second, how to prevent illegal discharge by the LTFs?
Thank you. The responsibility of the service now is after this under the local government. So every local government has to set up. One local government is under is around 60 cents per month. 60 cents per month for not for antique, but for antique itself $15 until $25 in 2 years. In some local governments collecting directly from the local government, but in other local government is under the responsibility of the wastewater company owned by the local government. Also the other one is under because we are water company, strictly water company. So they comply with the bill for the monthly fee, with the bill of the water.
Any more burning questions?
Hello. My question will be.
Can you give us your name to resume,
Okay, myself Pallavi Munix. I'm from State University, India. My question is to the last speaker. It's a very interesting design. I just wanted to know about the material, raw material which is this model has made up of. And also I want to know about the operation and maintenance. How is it being done, or how the user is going to maintain and operate it regularly so that it can last for several months or several years. Thank you.
Regarding to the phase 2 of the treatment, we approach it through storage and dehydration. We are monitoring how long we need to storage. This should be somewhere between 6 months and 18 months according to the theory. So the idea is that each family will receive 3 tanks or 3 buckets, and once you fill the third one, the first one is ready to be used as fertilizer. So that's something else.
I wanted to know about the material.
The cover material that you use.
No,
Plastic or?
Yeah, it's plastic. Yeah. 99% of the components are plastic. It's very light.
it's easy to be made in China.
Also now the price of plastic is going down worldwide. Durability will be, I would say that at least 10 years. We had, well, with previous models we had a lot more metal parts. Now, as I said, it's 99% plastic, so longer durability, and we have the requirements of friction. It's very simple.
I keep telling Marcos his example on slide to say it's very light. You can wipe it up, shit, and throw it in the because I don't like it. It works quite well. I think we're out of time. If there's any one last burning question, being a moderator is not nice being because I have to report back a whole lot of things that we all said. So I'm going to repeat some of the key sort of learnings that are emerging from this. And I think the gentleman raised a very important point, the first one, coming up from the theme around people sludge management and the business of it. Unlike the West, they produce municipal sludges, and there's hundreds of years of research and regulation and policy around municipal wastewater sludges. Fecal sludges is okay. And what happens is that you raise this question, is that what about guidelines in that? And that becomes the first hurdle because as officials and practitioners in developing countries, the first thing we do when we see fecal sludge is jump on it and say dead. And that stops the business. Okay? And I think you have to open your mind. It's an important point you raised, taking it back to say it's something we need to look at because this is not municipal sludge that has all the inorganics, the metals, etc. This is pure clean human shit. That's a resource, like you put it. And what value is it to the icon? And so that one I'm going to take back again as a very important point emerging from this session. I think Chaitanya, you talked about bringing value to the customer to solve everything. Because what we've been doing is just emptying and removing and not talking about what value we create. So maybe in the future we pay people to defecate more often and defecate more cleanly so we can get value in the process. The element that started to come up is that what we've seen in a developing country context, especially with on-site off-the-grid systems, is that the models are leading to social entrepreneurship kind of thing. It links to national governments, processes around job creation, local economic development, etc. But it's also saying that this business is best managed as a local government is, without local authorities passing on that responsibility. We are still responsible, but you can find models around how that partnership happens. I think you touched on in your presentation that this cannot happen without a partnership of all the players. We see it coming out from the Zambia or Kenya study. There's another institutional model around setting up trusts. There's another model around setting up franchises. So each country is going to have its own dynamics around what institutional arrangement best suits the kind of a model that will happen. But what underlies it is that it's a partnership and it's best in a social form. I think the other thing is standardization and regulation needs to kick in quite early because from what they say, it's quite a lot of shit we have to deal with very, very soon. So the quicker we can develop standards and regulations, that's important. It's also what was coming out from the presentations was this aspect of getting people more involved and engaged around this whole thing with sludge management, making them more aware of what is happening, what you're taking out, where you're taking it, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure if people are told that your feces generated $200 of energy, they will want to slice it and start negotiating. There's a whole lot of elements we can do. And I think the message also coming out is that it needs to happen at the lowest level. It needs to be successful. So, there's big dreamers that think that some of the top big water companies and wastewater companies can have a slice of the business, etc. What it's telling is that the early adopters are saying that it's only best suited for lowest level population. Something we need to take forward. And I think Marcos has shown an example where technology can drive change in greater market. In his last few slides, he sort of presented how a technology gets attention of government, then also assists in creating a market that is sustainable solutions in that. So I hope I summed those few points up. I was awake in the front taking this. So I want to thank the presenters for their time, preparing to come and present it to us. Let us give them a small round of applause. They're saying I'm a time master, but thank you all for your attention and your presence to make this happen. And hopefully after tea, there's more to absorb the next session. Thank you very much.